That's letting people pick which fantasy race they would like to be mommy and daddy to. In the mating manual I'm putting together. By the way, this is what the inside of a kobold looks like. They do this by grabbing the ruby gold, but let's talk about people who have inserted characters into the lore. Because while some people have elected to get their characters into the lore of certain series, others have chosen to take a different approach. So let's look at how some players have impacted the world. Let's talk about the one-of-a-kind male Imperivan, Drake. And if you know anything about Impirvans, you know that they're all flying cat girls. No, base Impirvans are not sentient. And it's not until later they evolve into red diamonds or black diamonds that they do gain sentience. They're like really smart cats. And that's important to know because Drake is not an evolved Impirvan, which means he does not have sentiency. Drake is from the Creighton Desert and specifically located near Yokohama. And that's exactly where Stroke, the god of summer seasons, is. And guess what his holy animal is? Oh, that's right, Impirvans. But after a very unpleasant encounter with the god, well, specifically his royal Impirvan, Eclipse, Drake was like, you know what, I'm leaving. He began a trek to get into the goddess of death's territory, Reaper. And to do this, he was going to travel south down the Sur Nile and then east along the Red Line and the Grand Lane. But Drake ran into an issue. But the thing is, he was running into several issues actually traveling down the Sur Nile because all of these are basically port stops. The amount of water traffic along here is insane. Not having proper understanding of what's going on because, you know, he's not been integrated into society, this caused a lot of potential combat situations. As far as anyone else is concerned, he's a monster just like this thing. But the real problems came after he passed Spilro. Because off to the east of Spilro, he started getting a scent of a female version of his kind. That's right, he was having a really strong sense of Impirvans off in this area. And the first problem with that is, Impirvans are incredibly territorial. So for him to walk up in there would basically mean a fight is about to happen. But because of the strength of the scent, meant that there were multiple Impirvans. And for my longtime viewers, we know that in Stroke's territory, the Creighton Desert, he uses Impirvans as basically aerial supremacy. They'll usually do this by setting up bases, attaching child soldiers to them that they can actually ride into combat with. But what he was most likely smelling was a military launching post for an Impirvan squad. Because even though we're getting outside the desert, Stroke is still responsible for all this territory, which means Impirvans still appear here, though not as much. So rightfully choosing to just continue, this is where the big problems came into play. Because he found a woman, haggard, malnourished, covered in dirty clothes, and smelling rancid, walking haggardly along the river. And while feeling some tinge of empathy to want to help this woman get to the next stop, he flew past her to go grab her, but she had already put her hands together. And whenever he went to go grab her to basically pick her up, he separated her hands and a beam of searing light came down from the sky and scorched the earth, and he barely was able to escape. He noticed scars on the woman's face. He noticed tattoos on her lower collar and on her midriff whenever the wind would blow. Most importantly, she had no eyes. It looked as though they had been plucked out of her skull. And so after chirping, because once again, he cannot normally communicate with the universal language, she offered him food to kind of go away. What she offered looked like jerky. And upon putting it in his mouth, it was the most disgusting thing that he had ever put in. Think of like a meaty, rotting gusher. Upon spitting it out, he realized it was a finger. So now he's like, this woman's a cannibal. So instead of killing her, he was like, I'm gonna go and get her normal food. So he went, killed an animal, and gave her the raw meat and pushed it into her face, indicating for her to eat. And upon consuming it, she instantly reshed it back up as that jerky, textured material covered in maggots with black bile coming out of it. So he was like, yo, that's not good. Maybe I should just put this thing out of her misery. So what did our boy do? He walked up to her, grabbed her hand and her face, and used Spitfire to literally burn her alive, and then tossed her body into the river. And then he continued on his way and went right up to Libya port. But the thing is, when he got to the port, he started hearing reports that the river had become tainted and Wamo had fallen. As plagues started to infest the land, and 4 deadly creatures known as the Prophets of Decay appeared once that body made it to town. And so now the decay and corruption is spreading into the creation sea. So this is the type of impacts that players can make on the world. And if you want to make an impact on the world, go ahead and grab a diamond sub.